Welcome to the 100 Master Coaches series featuring master coaches from around the world. Let's journey together on this 100 Master Coaches series, with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Ramanathan is an accredited master coach and trainer with the International Coach Federation, European Mentoring and Coaching Council, and the Center for Credentialing Education. Ram is also a certified coach, supervisor, and mentor, and co-founded Coacharya in 2013, which is now one of the largest coaching and coach training institutions outside North America. Now on to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the 100 Master Coaches show. This is Coach Mal, and today, oh my gosh, I'm already having a great time because I've had the pre-show with my friend here. Please give a rousing welcome to Ramanathan. Oh, he's one of the earliest master coaches in India. You will all be amazed by this. So welcome to the show, Ram.
Thank you, Mel. Yeah. Well, just to tell you, I was probably the fifth or something master coach in India. There were others ahead of me. And as I told you, I failed to pass my MCC 4 times, and I did it. So, anyway.
Well, it is not a secret that I also took a couple of times, so we've got quite a lot of things in common there, Ram. I'd like to start with this, right? Tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit about that story you've been saying about your vast experience in different parts of the world, like in Indonesia and Singapore. Would you like to begin there?
Yeah, sure. Of course, my life and career began in the south of India, where I born and grew up in a very, very conservative religious family, as it were. Trained to be an engineer and moved out of, I didn't want to be where I was, the city of Madras, it was called at that time. I wanted to go as far away as possible to be honest. That was the southern east part of it, and I went to the northern west part of it, in a state called Rajasthan in India, where I was fortunate to be recruited as a management trainee by, at that time, one of the largest in India. Spent a couple of years. And I was an engineer. So basically, I started my early training as, I don't know, those of you probably who have some awareness of factory operations, I was trained as a fitter. That means I was make maintenance. So how do you break apart pumps, put them together, and so on, all that kind of stuff. And so, I did about 2 years there, and I moved into Unilever in India, which was in the city of Mumbai. That is where I met my wife. After a couple of years, we married. I continued with Leo till about, I was 40. It was my alma mater in many ways. Amazing company, even still.
Of course.
Tremendous regard for it. And at that time, I was getting a little bit restless. My expectations in terms of how I wanted to grow myself wasn't quite matching with the organization opportunities. So I had an opportunity to run a company. So I joined a company where I ran 2 other companies, turned them around, and so on. And around 1991 is when I moved out of India, because the Indian laws were very, very strict in terms of salary to senior managers and so on. So my dream was to get my children as best educated as possible, if possible to send them to US and stuff. Both my sister and brother were there in the US. So anyway, there was an opportunity that I moved to Indonesia, where I had spent 3 years with Unilever, where I became the CEO of a company, eventually built a multibillion dollar conglomerate, which spectacularly collapsed in 1997. There was a Southeast Asian crisis. By 2000, we waited for our daughter to finish her schooling there in an amazingly beautiful school, great school, Jakarta International School. Both my son and daughter graduated from there, and then she went off to school in the US, to New York, NYU, and we moved to Singapore. And I spent pretty much 10 years, 2000 to 2010, almost. And various things happened at that time. Started from the bottom, from being on the pyramid, governing probably 100,000 across the world with 12 JVs and all that stuff. I was my own office boy and secretary and everything. Singapore, it costs a hell of a lot of money to buy a car. So without it. So it's a very difficult life. In Indonesia, I had 2 cars and a half-acre house and pool and 5 servants. Here, there was nothing. So anyway, we spent some time, and after some time, none of what I was doing seemed to make sense to me, because then I had a fair amount of money. And in fact, I had, I think, 10 shares of Berkshire Hathaway, which today are $500,000 each, to be honest.
Yeah.
Kept them. I didn't. So 2000 investment scenario, there was a .com and reduced to about 30% of what I had. So I had to start relooking at my life, what I was doing. None of it made sense. Impermanence, process of anything, power, wealth, everything. So I went on a spiritual journey for a period of about 6 years, trying to discover myself. And in the process, I wrote about 30 books on Hindu-Buddhist traditions and did all kinds of meditations, climbed the Himalayas 4 times to various spots, and traveled around the world teaching probably about 10,000 people on various kinds of things, meditation, and so on and so forth. And one fine day, woke up to discover that the guy who was my preceptor, the guru, wasn't what he seemed, and he was totally a crook and did everything that he told us not to do. So it was a rude awakening.
Yeah.
And the person who was most happy was my wife. She had been wanting to get out of it. She knew, and I didn't realize that I was in a cult. And thankfully, I did it. So probably something from the past that helped, or my wife. So as I got out of it, I was in a bit of a bind in terms of what to do with my life. I was about 60 at that time. And so I tried a few working with NGOs, because I really didn't need the money. They were back in Bangalore at the time. I came back from Singapore to Bangalore. And I tried to work with NGOs. That didn't work very well, because there were many of them that I tried to establish contact were as fake as this spiritual guru was. So I decided that I would rather go back to the corporate space, where I knew people were not at least hypocrites. If they wanted to make money, they said, we want to make money. So that's fine with me, so long as I knew what it was.
Yeah.
So one of my friends at that time advised me, you said that you had a calling from God. I didn't have a calling from God. I had a calling from this mentor of mine. We walked around a park and he told me, hey, Ram, you know what? You've done so many things. You've been a troubleshooter. You've done this, multilingual, multicultural, all that. You speak about 4 or 5 languages, all that kind of stuff. And so you're a good problem solver, and that's, so why didn't you become a coach? Which was all the wrong reasons why to become a coach. But anyway, so as I started on it, and that's what you asked me at that time. And my wife said, you have done so many stupid things in your life. So this is one more thing. So what the heck are you talking about? I said, no. It sounds very good. I said, okay, find out. I went to ICF, looked at it, and it said, you have to be a good listener, or active listening, or whatever that competency was called.
Yeah.
I went back, you don't even listen to me. How the hell are you going to listen to other people? So I said, okay, I'll prove that I'm a good listener. So that was a challenge that I took. And so I enrolled with, as I said, an Australian institute that you also know that. Used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning, sometimes go to bed at 1 o'clock in the night, because the times were different. But anyway, within about 9 months or whatever it is, I became probably the 3rd PCC coach in India at that time. 2 were in India. There were a couple of them who had gone after me. And then I wanted to do something in terms of training, because I really liked working with young people. Coaching was an option. I was doing something. That is when I started what eventually became Coacharya. So started partnering with the Australian company, and then went out on my own, started my ACSDH, ACTP, and all that kind of stuff. So today, we, since 2017, when CEO Magda joined us, she's a friend of my son, who was my partner. He wanted to do other things. And she has grown the company globally today. So we are reasonably sized at this point in time. Probably we have graduated about maybe 50 to 60% of all the credentialed coaches in India. And possibly we have done about 40, 50 MCCs across the world, maybe 2,000 coaches totally. Yeah, so that is where we are. And that's been the journey in a sense. And now what we want to do is a different issue. Yeah.
When I'm listening to the story, and I get a couple of things, Ram. Number one is our wives are so wise. Don't you think so? They often see the things we don't want to see, even though we kind of know it. And especially when it comes to them, we're like, okay, I should have listened to you, but I didn't. It's all right. Now I'm listening to you anyway. So that's the first thing I'm getting. Right? Let's trust the wife a little bit more. So that's the first thing I get. Number two, I kind of realized that you have
not just trust. So now I'm quite okay to say, look, I bow down. So, but yeah, not all. So there is another element with it. So, but I am reasonably in a wise mood. I accept wisdom. Yeah.
So the other thing I realized is that you've been, in a way, like a self-made man, where you went out for those things. In today's language, we say we hustled really hard, right? We worked really hard. We made our way, made a name for ourselves, did the right things. So I think that's the second thing. And then the third, Ram, if you don't mind me saying, is that I'm sure we've got good friends that we kind of walk with in our journey, right? And so this one friend that you were walking around that garden or that park or wherever you were, walking around with him, where suddenly this thing got excited in your core, right? Can you describe that a little bit more so that people can kind of catch that whenever they feel aligned with this thing called coaching in the future?
Look, I wish it was as dramatic as you put it. Movie story or whatever. It wasn't, to be honest.
Okay.
I was in a sense at the lowest at a point in time, one of the many low areas.
Yeah.
And most things that have happened to me have happened totally by accident. And it's like, I don't know if you've read Joseph Campbell's Hero's Journey. Yeah. It's like the call and you keep postponing it or you answer many other calls and there's something else. So
yeah.
I didn't have a clue. I'm totally an accidental coach. Okay, I'm not like many great coaches claim that they are born coaches and they knew when they were born or when they were 5 that they are going to be the greatest coaches of the world and all that stuff. Nothing of that sort. I was an idiot as a leader, though I climbed the ladder and helped build my companies. Emotionally and otherwise, I was unintelligent, to be honest. So this came up at a point in time where I think I was pretty desperate to find something to occupy myself. And so this seemed a good idea and it seemed a challenge. My wife said, you can't even listen. And said, look, let me better try this. So it was something that occupied me for a certain period of time. And then we went through it. What did change, to be honest, what you said, which was like an awakening in that hero's journey was, when I worked with these people in groups of maybe like you did with the same institute, sometimes there could be 20 people in a class, sometimes there could be 5, whatever. There were many who were far, far younger, and I was about 60 or around that time, 60 plus, whatever. And they couldn't care a damn about who I was and what my past was, what kind of things, feathers I wore on my head and crowns I wore on my head. It was in the moment how you were able to interact with them and what showed up. Yeah. And that could only happen if I listened and then appropriately responded. Yeah. And that somehow triggered something in me. I've always been a meditator for a very long time. Started with TM when I was 24, did many other things after that. So there was something about it, and I had gone through this journey by that time, which wasn't productive in one sense, but very productive in another sense that I learned a lot. There was something deeply spiritual about it. So there was a sense of peace that I got out of it. There was a sense of fulfillment that I got out of it. Not because I was able to solve somebody else's problem, but just the process of interaction. So that is really what to me made a difference. And that is what today, in a way, that defines me as a coach. And that's what defines what we are trying to build Coacharya as an entity. So I only wish it was all dramatic as, but it wasn't. So achieving the mastery, the label was the least of it. I couldn't care less if I didn't have it. I would happily drop that and not be known as a master coach of whether ICF or EMCC or anybody else. Carry it for business reasons so that it helps. But what does that mean? Does it make you more vulnerable, more humble? We believe in the Carl Rogers philosophy of unconditional positive regard and empathy. Are we genuinely doing that in everything that? Are we carrying that soul of coaching as a coach into our daily lives, or is it just a facade, like Dr. Hill and Mr. Hyde kind of a stuff? So that is what many of us are. We carry so many baggages that we haven't cleansed ourselves. So these are some of the things which we are struggling with at this point in time, trying to incorporate in our coaching and coach training. Yeah.
It's very interesting you brought that up, Ram, about those insecurities that we all hold. And how true do we bring it out in our day-to-day life, in our day-to-day walk as a coach? Or do we just put it on when we are coaching, right? And I think that's one of the struggles of perhaps even myself as I was growing up as a coach, and of course the younger coaches out there. Just love to hear that a little bit more on how we can, I guess, genuinely be the coach, not just putting it on for the sake of it, but the word is embodying. You know, the new core competency, number 2, embodying a coaching mindset. And I guess it's just your thoughts on how that can be done in the most vulnerable as well as the most genuine way.
Okay, let me put it this way, try and cover it from different viewpoints.
Yeah.
I'm extremely happy that ICF finally, in the 2019 revision, has this aspect of coaching mindset. For the first time, formally, it has been recognized that self-awareness is the most important. Earlier, it was a bunch of philosophies as ethics, which were more legal than anything else. It didn't make much sense to me. Now the coaching mindset defines much more clearly that you need to be self-aware, you need to be these to be unconditional positive regard, empathy, and so on and so forth to be a good coach. And then how do you apply them? And therefore you become a good coach who's able to evoke awareness in other people. Now, the problem is, how many of us during a coach training program go through a process of self-discovery to create self-awareness and who we are? And do we go through a process that enables us to look within, introspect, do whatever, so that at least, if not cleanse it, at least we are aware that this is what we are.
Yeah.
And there are many things which are unacceptable, whether we are insecure, whether something else, or aggressive, whatever. I'm not saying that I've fully gotten out of many of those kind of things. I still have my biases, but most of the time, as soon as something happens, immediately there's an awareness, look, this is what I did. I need to correct myself. And a third is, how truly do we project our inner self outside? Which is what you mentioned and I mentioned earlier about, are you a coach in everything that you do? And if you just say, hey, this is code of ethics or coaching mindset, take a very, very simple thing. There are many people, if you go to LinkedIn, and many people whom I have trained, who say that they coach CEOs. And believe me, I can count on the fingertips of one hand the CEOs that I have coached. Because CEOs don't like to change. They like other people to change. And many studies have shown that many people in larger companies as CEOs, they are psychopaths and sociopaths. I mean, surveys are available. I'm not stating anything that is critical or anything of that sort. And somehow or other, that power gets into you, arrogance, and takes away all what could be genuinely leadership qualities.
Yeah.
So the good ones are probably 20%, 80% are in that shape. So where is this question of coaching CEOs? How many coaches have you coached? And these people have never been in leadership positions themselves. And how can they coach CEOs? Then, I mean, 20 years I have spent in CEO positions. And I find it sort of, and maybe I have coached at the most about 5 or 10 CEOs. Mostly the CEOs want CXOs to be coached, so I end up by coaching CXOs. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. Managers and all that stuff. So why do we lie to ourselves? Why do we lie to other people? And if you point out some of these things, okay, people get very upset that this is not happening. And so that attitude sort of spreads across many things. So at the first level, are we really being honest? At the second level, are we being vulnerable?
Yeah.
Coaching is a journey of not knowing. Coaching is not a journey in solving problems. Coaching is not a journey where I know more than the client and therefore I'm able to help. I don't. And that's what Carl Rogers says on Becoming a Person. You don't know a damn thing about the other person. That other person knows far more. The person you are dealing with as a client or a patient or anyone knows far more about themselves. All that you have to do is to listen to them and explore and inquire, which is what the competencies are. But then when we start coaching, we sort of put ourselves on a pedestal and become elitist. So this is, I mean, earlier before this thing, we are talking about democratizing. And that is, it's like, you know, the other word that I've heard used sometimes is decolonization. We behave like colonial powers. We have the strength, we have the power. Come on, let that go and be humble and be not knowing. And that is what a coaching mindset is. So these are some of the barriers that I see today and which need to shift. I guess, some of us, like you said, you are working on it, we are working on it. Let's see where it leads us. That's all I can say.
Thank you, Ram. So true, right? The change, I often say, is the person right there in front of the mirror on a daily basis, looking at that person and saying, And sometimes I look down because I'm just too embarrassed. And as I look at myself in the mirror too much, I'm like, I still don't kind of like the person in front of me. And that's why the first point was, yes, I need my wife to tell me about me. And then I get a bit more awareness about me. And then I get my very close friends to quietly tell me the things that I didn't want to hear from the start, right? So I was like, okay, I'll receive it from that friends as well. That's why we as coaches kind of need supervision and mentoring because we don't see what we don't see. So I'm just going to ask you, Ram, what are your thoughts on that? The need for that feedback from that outside point of view so that we can kind of jig a little bit of our sandcastles that we hold on to.
Totally. I 100% agree with you. Exactly like you said about your wife. For me, my wife is my mirror. She's my mentor and my coach, supervisor, whatever you might want to call it in a behavioral sense, not necessarily in terms of coaching competencies.
Yeah.
The problem is, I see all of these becoming very mercenary. For me, coaching itself is a spiritual journey. But yet, like we talked about earlier, we need to earn money as well. And therefore, how do we balance this need to survive with coaching or whatever as associated with coaching, with that need to make it into a spiritual journey, which I mean, I'm very clear in my mind that giving anything as charity is not the answer, because it actually works the other way. People who do that too, they seem to suffer from guilt later. In fact, it doesn't work out right in terms of your relationship. So there has to be something that needs to be returned. If you give, you have to receive something in return. And how appropriate can it be depending upon the capability of the other person to be able to give back to you? These are some of the things that come up. So coming back to the stuff that you told me is about supervision and mentoring, I totally accept that maybe at a certain level, mentoring means that you need to go to someone who knows more about that particular skill than you do. So yeah, surely, I have a couple of people to whom I reach out from time to time to just shoot the breeze, as it were, in terms of understanding. And the supervision, absolutely. Again, it's more about coaching a coach on coaching. The trouble is that also has become very mercenary. It's another way to make money. I don't know. I mean, I don't have any answers as yet in terms of how these can be done. So what we are trying to do is to, as much of these things as possible, we are offering it free during webinars, peer coaching sessions, peer supervision sessions, and so on and so forth. We still have to make money. And therefore, if you really would like to be accredited to some 3-letter label or whatever label, 2-letter label, then of course we have to charge you. And more and more, and I'll stop with this and we can explore it further, is that I'm looking at training people to coach themselves to be in my personal opinion, the most beneficial way of how we can help people. Because then, to a very large extent, I think 80% of what we can coach ourselves, and that helps us in becoming more self-aware. And 20% where, yeah, you do need someone to be a mirror. So at that 20% of the time, you can go to somebody else. And that doesn't necessarily have to be an executive coach who charges you $1.50. So at least as far as most common transactions are concerned, yeah, but when you come to a leadership space where companies are looking at it as an alternative to other interventions, organizational development, I see coaching expanding in a much bigger way. I think it's just not limited to that one-to-one interaction. It can be a lot.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about where you see coaching take form. On one side, yes, it's a business. Agree with you. I have met, and of course, you probably quite a few that are fantastic coaches, and then not so good business people, vice versa. And sometimes it's a bit of a pain because I feel that necessity to kind of equip the coaches to be successful as well, and not just give things pro bono out there in the market, which there's a place for that, obviously, but the coach needs to survive and thrive. So that's one side of things. And then there's the other side where we did touch a little bit about it, and it's that reach. Right? How can coaching go down to those grassroots places? Right? The important place like the teaching community, important places like social enterprises, the important places like even families, parents having that skill sets of coaching, which I did not have when I was having my kids growing up and using all kinds of threats to get my way, with them. Love to hear your thoughts on how coaching can progress, I guess, at the end of the day. On one side, yeah, there's the money element. And then on the other side, that needs to be that drive that will take coaching to that next level where it's not just for the elites out there.
Yeah. This is an area that we are working on. The first and foremost is that as long as we are focused on coaching one-on-one individuals, it's going to be very difficult. Scalability, and as you said, I'm totally all for the coaches earning money. That's what we need to do.
Yeah.
People see it as a revenue source and within limits. Way out, I see, which is what we are trying to evangelize, is a systemic approach where you have the three elements of I, we, and it, the larger society or the organization. So more and more, we are trying to persuade organizations and even individuals to come to a collective kind of coaching space. Especially in organization, it makes a huge difference that when you start coaching a bunch of people as a team, first to develop a group into a team, emotionally bonded, and then from there address the pain points of the organization can actually see the benefits in dollars and cents rather than derived figures which do not make much sense to me when people try to justify how individual coaching and shifting a behavior can provide an ROI, which is, to me, is very fictional, if not real. So one is make it collective coaching, depending on the size that one can handle, depending on the themes that one can handle, and look at it from a systemic perspective. That means even if it's, let's say, two people, partners, or husband and wife, or father and son or daughter, whatever it may be, in a life issue. It's not just exploring about that person, what is going on in the mind, but much more beyond that in terms of people whom they impact and who impact them. So that is where the whole systemic concept would come from. And where possible, especially in a corporate context, today we talk about a leadership team. And when I really look at leadership teams as they are defined in companies, they don't work as a team. They may come together for a board meeting or something, and the moment they are outside, they are competing, they are actually daggers drawn at each other, and so on and so forth. So the question to them is, you call yourself a team, are you really a team? And very often when about 5, 6 people are brought in from the same company for me to coach, I say, could I do this together? You will save a lot of money because I charge by the hour. So you are going to pay 1/5, 1/6, 1/10, or whatever it is. In the process, I will also try and help to develop you as a team. They don't want to. The ego is such, no, I want to be coached independently. So my question very often, which loses me contracts, is if you believe that you are a team, but you do not want to be coached as a team, however, how in hell you are going to really work as a team? How is it going to happen? There are 3 or 4 advantages that the company gets. They are actually building teams, which is what they keep wanting to say, that I want to synergize, make maximum use of my human power. Second, they are able to define some broader goals, meta goals, as well as transactional goals, which they want to achieve and which they can be actually see happening. They can calculate the ROI. And it's cheaper. So I see absolutely no reason why any corporation should go in for individual coaching in preference to systemic tool coaching. And you can always add that little bit. If you find some issues with a particular person and you are able to bring it out in a team session, maybe you can add 2 or 3 rather than a longer term intervention. So that's one part of it. The second part of it, which I started talking about, is more and more I see companies are clearly looking for people. If it's a technology company or if it's a financial company, they would prefer to have somebody who speaks the language. Forget about knowledge. They're not looking for experts in that field. But like one of the things, when I first started working with technology, though I'm fairly familiar with technology, somebody was using a word called skip level. I didn't understand what the heck skip level meant, right? Till I had to say, look, sorry, I don't understand that word. But they said, oh, it's one level above. Oh, yeah. As you go along, somebody talks about agile. They talk about the scrums and the sprints and whatever else it is. If today, if you're a technology company coaching, you don't know what agile is, if that company is using it, you pretty much miss a lot of what's happening in that company, because then you can. So pretty much everything, be it counseling and be it therapy. Today, not only the father of counseling, but he's also the father of coaching. So I'm sure I cannot be a psychiatrist, I cannot prescribe medicines or whatever. But if you're a good coach, or if you understand the basics of psychology, if you understand Jung and Freud and Martin Seligman, people like that, you have reasonably as good a knowledge as any qualified psychologist in many ways, like a counseling psychologist, to be able to function in that space. It depends on how much you want to expand your knowledge. This is what I constantly endeavor to do, even at the age of now 74. I'm a learner. I don't know a damn thing to teach about. So I just convey what I have learned. That's about all. So what I see is, looking into the future, that coaching can encompass these multiple spaces. Unfortunately, we are trying to create artificial boundaries. Mentoring is not coaching. Training is not, supervision is not coaching. Consulting is not coaching. We are more worried about creating these artificial boundaries.
Wow.
Probably to think that we can promote ourselves as niches, which is going to kill us. I think the most, I think, pointless, when we start realizing we can be all this, but coaching is a philosophy, coaching is an approach, it's a methodology. It's not a skill that you develop. And I can apply it in training, I can apply it in counseling, I can apply it in therapy, I can apply it in cooking, I can apply it in anything. Then in that case, you are widening your market without endangering anything in yourself, because that approach is the beauty of the approach, that you are empowering people who are disempowered through their own resources by evoking the awareness of how their beliefs are holding them back, be it insecurity or invalidation. And that is how I see the future of coaching. Another one I feel strongly about is, why are we fighting regulation by the government? So many other things are being regulated. Now, I'm being regulated by the accreditation agency. I would rather be regulated by a broader agency, which has personal interest in it, but it has professional interest. So if counseling is regulated, psychological counseling is regulated, therapy is regulated, why can't coaching be regulated? What is so special about it? So these are some of the things I see definitely happening in the next few years.
I just love what you're saying, Ram, in so many levels. You talk about the connectivity of things, right? Which I really believe as well, because the more we try to separate and use those words, the colonization of things, which is so true. The more we try to separate, the more we start putting up these walls or artificial barriers, as you say. We start to make ourselves exclusive instead of making inclusivity as our key. I'm just curious, in your legacy days, what would be one wish that you would have for the people listening, at least to this podcast, coaches, non-coaches? What's that wish of yours?
It's very simple. This is pretty much the tagline that Magda created for Coacharya. We as coaches should first ourselves and then help others to discover what may be our best self or better self. I mean, that's all it is. Whatever that we define as that better self, from where we are today in multiple levels of honesty, vulnerability, service to other people. And this then, when combined with the systemic approach, which is the concept of John Donne's "No man is an island," or the Ubuntu, "I am because we are," or a famous Hindu Upanishad statement which says, "He or one who sees oneself in others and others in oneself, that person is the evolved one." So if we can just look at that way, we become our better selves when we start incorporating the needs of others with us. And if that we can do, and I think that's really the vocation of coaches. And if you can do that, I think everything else will follow, everything else will integrate. Why tell people, no, you are teaching is not coaching, preaching is not coaching, consulting is not coaching, counseling is not coaching. I would rather look at it from this point of view. How can that teaching can become coaching? How can that consulting can become coaching? What is it that we are talking about as coaching? We are trying to empower people. We are trying to be vulnerable, not knowing, trying to evoke the awareness in the other person. Let's do it for ourselves and then take it to other people. I mean, that's hopefully what we are trying to do is today what Otto Scharmer does through Theory U. The whole concept of Theory U, opening from the closed state to the open state, that you, and then how do you apply it? That is, we need to do it individually and collectively.
Yeah.
And that to me is the true essence and spirit of coaching.
What I'm taking away is instead of the or mentality, it's coming with the and mentality.
Exactly.
I would love to say thank you for what you're doing for our community. I reached out to you because I saw what you were doing, obviously from an external point of view, and then finally getting to know you a little bit more. I'm just so thankful to hear all the things that you have said today, not just because it resonates with me, but I think it resonates with the world. As we love ourselves, we have to love others as well. It's a two-way street, and it's not just something that we do for our own whim and fancy, but it's something that we do out of service, out of abundance of what we have received, and just like an outpouring of it into our communities.
Totally. Thanks a lot. And what you said is beautiful. I mean, we need to love ourselves before we can love others. And we need to love others before we can love ourselves. It's a totally two-way street. It's so integrated. It is symbiotic. So there's no other way of looking at it. So it's been an absolute pleasure. And let's be in touch. Thank you. Thank you very much.
And this has been the 100 Master Coaches show today with Ram and myself, saying take care, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye for now.
You have been watching the 100 Master Coaches series with your host, Coach Mel, MCC. Brought to you by Catalyst Coach. www.catalystcoach.live. We will be right back with our next Master Coach on the 100 Master Coaches series.